I did like Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris,
They were the best.
I like the Yankees.
Okay, so
But
let's
I'm a
walk,
I
let's
tell
walk
you,
over
when
here.
the Brooklyn Dodgers moved, that was destroyed.
And Donna's a little tired, Art, because she has to do this whole skit at 12:30.
Yeah.
So if you did want to start to go live, you may want Anna Smith Strong. is
Okay,
over
we just
here.
started.
Yeah.
Oh, hello everybody.
Yep.
Welcome to Setauket. We're here at Culper Spy Day. We've been so lucky to have Mrs. Q with us today, and we hope really you enjoy your journey. We really feel that the entire community is our museum, so I hope you enjoy your tour today with Mrs. Q. We have Benjamin Talmadge escorting Mrs. Q today, so you guys are in for a real treat because you're going to be really following in the footsteps of where all the action took place and see the true stops of the Culper Spy Ring. So enjoy yourself today, and welcome.
Thank you, Margot.
You're welcome, Karen. Welcome.
Hi, is this the beginning of the 12 o'clock tour?
Yes, go.
So, good afternoon, Major Talmadge.
Good afternoon, madam.
It's so good to meet you, Elias.
Oh, it's so good to finally meet you,
and,
face to face.
Thank you for having me here in Setauket today. I am very excited about learning all about the ways your neighbors have invented schemes to defeat the plans of our enemy. As you know, my city is occupied, as is yours, and I'm so excited to learn of what you've discovered about them.
Well, now I can bring it about because it is the future, but it was a well-kept secret for 150 years. No one knew about my friends in the so-called spy ring. It wasn't called the Culper Spy Ring in those days. It wasn't called the Culper Spy Ring until the late 19th century. But however, the reason it was a well-kept secret is because as spies, I only used my friends, my childhood friends, who I've known since grade school, children I grew up with. That's the only reason it was a well-kept secret for so many years. Those are the only people I trusted. Later on, when we were married, our wives, our children never even knew about our spy operations for General Washington.
So today, you're, I believe, going to take me around and introduce me to everyone and show me some demonstrations of the methods that you have developed to foil the English?
Yes, we will.
All right, so let's walk around here on the green here in Setauket and see what we find. Behind the camera is Mr. Q. You may feel free to enter your comments in the comment box and he will see them and relay them to us. Mr. Q, are people watching?
There might be a couple.
Mr. Q is not sure. Let's take a look. Okay, well, let's hope.
Did it say voice on?
Yeah, that is video only, so it won't show if anybody enters
Right.
comments. If somebody is entering comments, you'll see them here.
Yeah, I'll see him over here.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Speaking
let's,
of cues, is my
It-
cue.
oh, let's see Mr. Q. How is that straight? Is he straight?
Okay, so it's got to come over to the left a little bit.
Okay.
Now it's perfect.
Okay. Good.
Okay. So where are we going first, sir?
We're going to the Three Village Historical Society headquarters, the Bale Sweezy House, which dates circa 1800. And we've had this actually since the late 1990s. Before that, we had a closet.
This is why I put you here. Hi, Karen.
Hello.
I'm Maddie.
This is
Hi.
Maddie, Three
Nice
Village
to
Historical
meet you.
Society.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for coming. You
Thank
look
you
beautiful.
so much for inviting me today.
Yes. So we a tour just went in. This is Anna Strong.
A pleasure, madam. A pleasure indeed. May I speak with you for a while?
Please do.
I have come out today to learn all about the very brave things that you have done here to help foil the plans of our vicious enemy. And of course, I hear that you are key in those plans.
Oh, I have not really been telling very many people about my role in the Culper Spy Ring. It was something that I knew that I had to do. I was a patriot, I loved my country. I wanted to make sure that I would be able to do something important for them.
Well, I believe, ma'am, that you will be remembered for a very long time for the role that you played and your bravery and courage. Is it true you took secret journeys into my occupied city of New York?
I went posing as the wife of Abraham Woodhull so that when we had information, we wouldn't be searched as husband and wife.
Much
That is
easier
true.
for him, I assume, than trying to enter as a single man.
Oh, he would have been suspected and probably searched. And so it'd be easier to have husband and wife together.
And are you at liberty to tell me where you stayed when you came into our city?
I would rather not, although I did have relatives, my brothers, who were Tories, lived in the city.
Oh, so you had a reason for visiting then, and an excuse to give to the soldiers of why you wanted to enter.
I probably did, if asked. I wouldn't have shared that otherwise.
Otherwise. Now, did you have any relationship to the Underhills?
Abraham's sister was married to Amos Underhill,
My goodness.
and so it was the boarding house where Abraham would stay when he would go in, making his trips into the city. And so that was a convenient way for him to stay and then be able to go around the city and gather information.
I know it well, the boarding house on Queen Street, a very apt location for such contacts to be made.
And of course, you knew that Robert Townsend was also someone who lived there.
Yes, his shop, by the way, is not far from mine in Hanover Square, and I also believe he worked in James Rivington's printing house, although it's rumored that he was indeed the real owner of that coffee house.
Well, I know not of all that information. I know that Abraham trusted Robert Townsend, and that was really the most important part, that he had someone that he knew could gather the information with his sources, and we could trust him.
Yes, and someone trusted by all of the English, right? I hear that Mr. Townsend was very well liked by the British officers and that it was unlikely they would have suspected him.
Well, he wrote for the Rivington Gazette, and so you have to imagine they wouldn't have talked to him if they hadn't thought that he was reliable.
You know, my sister and I refer to Mr. Rivington's Gazette as the Lying Gazette, and we read it for entertainment.
I think that was part of the intent, to have it be an entertainment. Yes.
We especially liked, I don't know if you ever saw it, a small story he had declaring that Mr. Franklin had been captured on a road outside of Paris and beaten to death, which I believe was a big surprise to Mr. Franklin.
I would think so. And so this was one of the stories?
Yes, in Mr. Rivington's own paper.
No wonder you called it the Lying Gazette.
Quite entertaining to read. Now, we have also heard that there may have been coded messages placed in classified ads in Rivington's Gazette. Is that correct?
I know not.
I might have to speak to Mr. Townsend or Mr. Woodhull about that, but I hear Mr. Woodhull is very secretive about everything.
Mr. Woodhull keeps all of his information close to his chest. He does not share. And many of the spies are doing that for the reason that they need to protect not only themselves but one another.
Absolutely, and family members, because we know the British are so vicious that it would not be beyond them to kidnap a family member and torture them in order to get information.
Well, we know that Abraham's father was beaten, and we also none of the gentlemen that were acting as part of the Culper spy ring were married, possibly except for Austin, who had his tavern to run with his wife and family, but possibly they weren't married for that reason, that they didn't want to put in jeopardy a wife.
Now, did you worry about your husband? Was he in the Continental Congress at that time?
Sela was, as you know, captured, but upon release, he went to Connecticut, where he stayed for the remainder of the war. Had he come back, we feared that he would be watched as he was previously, and in watching him, that would cast light on what was happening with the Culpers.
Of course, and they were always suspicious. I know that in the city of New York, they watch very carefully and are often suspicious of everyone and their motivations.
It's hard to live in such a place that you had to watch everything that you said or did.
I'm sure it is. I'm quite, what I can even say, impressed with all of you living under British rule for so long, operating right under their noses. I, of course, left New York City. I'm staying in the Hudson Valley near Haverstraw, but I can't imagine what it would be like to be having them live in your home with you, have them walking around everywhere, listening and suspicious, and, not considering you to be subjects of the crown, but to be, some kind of interlopers on their territory.
Even the loyalists were treated that way by the British. And so, yes, it was a very difficult situation. As you know, they came and they took over my home, and I was forced to move into the cottage on the property with my children.
And I'm sure they did not treat you with the respect a lady deserved.
I would say that is true.
We won't go into that. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, Mrs. Strong. It has been a true honor and a pleasure. Major Talmadge, shall we?
They got Billy Edmonds says hello.
Oh, yeah.
Mark.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Mrs. Strong, and we are going to be moving on to see who else we can find today in Setauket. If you don't know, this is the Three Village Historical Society, and they do give tours here, and I think we are in the way right now of a tour that's about to begin, so I'm going to urge Major Talmadge to move on with me.
Her real name is Smith. That was Donna Smith. She really is a Smith. Teacher, because she was the best fourth grade teacher I ever had.
Major Talmadge, who are we going to meet next?
Well, let's see. You've met Diane Schwint, right? Our 18th century cook, or would you like to go over there? I think you should.
I haven't met anyone yet.
Okay.
I've just arrived. So who are you taking me to meet next,
I'm
Major?
taking you to the best 18th century cook on Long Island Bar.
Goodness.
Her name is Diane Schwint, and we have a special treat for you next month, as you'll find out.
It is a lovely day out here today in Setauket.
Yes, a little bit warm in wool, but yes.
A little warm. I put my scarf, as you notice, I put my scarf in the carriage as I was getting a little too warm with it. Oh my goodness, it's a red coat. Shall I be worried about him?
No, we can. He's friendly.
All right. All right. So let's see. I believe we have a cooking demonstration. Perhaps I'll go around this side.
I follow you.
Thank you.
I enjoy it very much.
Thank you. It is a thrill to meet you. Thank you.
I'm glad you got out here.
Thank you so much for following me.
Yeah, it's
It
wonderful.
is wonderful to be out here in Setauket today and out of the city and enjoying this beautiful weather and
should
meeting
come more
everyone.
often.
I believe I will now. I did not know it was such an easy trip.
That's my sister.
Shall we meet the cook?
Oh, am I talking over you? Oh, okay.
Major Talmadge, would you like to introduce us?
Yes. Diane Schwint, best 18th century cook on Long Island, bar none. I'd like you to meet Mrs. Q, who's visiting us by coach. all the way from the city of New York. First time in Setauket, right?
It is my first
I
time.
am so honored.
I am as well, madam.
I have been looking forward to meeting you for the longest time.
Oh, that's so wonderful. That's so kind.
Thank you. I'm the historic cook at the Catch'em Inn that's located in Santa Mauritius, and today I chose a recipe from Mary Floyd Talmadge's cookbook.
What is it?
It's an original recipe that is a boiled pudding, and I'm going to take it off the. I have a brazier going right now, and I'm going to take it off and I'm going to serve it to you.
I mean, you may not know that I am a merchant lady, and I have no culinary talents whatsoever. I'm sorry to say Mr. Q would probably agree with that, and my own mother constantly tells me what a failure I am as a lady of the house, and I do have to order all of my food or have someone come in and cook for me, as that is not one of my talents or things I have ever mastered. So I am fascinated to hear about what you have here.
Well, I have to tell you, this would be a dish that I would serve at your house. This would be a winter dish, and it would be served as a bread like not a bread pudding, but a plum pudding. So figgy pudding and plum pudding, where you see these references in historic songs and stories, that's what I'm going to be making.
What is in the bundle that's on the flame?
So the bundle, 100 years earlier, would have been the stomach of an animal or intestines, and it would have been more of a sausage, like haggis. It would have been a boiled meat. And as time went on, as meat probably became less available, they probably added grains to it, and that's where you see the transition come. So what I did is I have it's flour, it's breadcrumbs, because you wouldn't waste any bread. You would grate it into it, and I have currants. So that's pretty much it in eggs.
And how long does it boil on the fire?
Hours. Historic cooking back then, hours were taken to make food. Most dishes were a one-pot meal, and this particular kind of pudding might have been the only meal that they would have had for the day.
Some light,
Right.
something for breakfast, and
Right.
then this would have stayed on the table as people ate throughout the day.
Throughout the day, it would have really been filled your belly with it as a good hearty meal. Meat would have been served with it if they had it, but if not, this would have been pretty much it.
And I'm guessing during the time of the British occupation here, there would have been little meat available, as any that was available would have been used for the soldiers and the army first, and all of the residents would have been secondary in
My
their
dragoons
needs.
are fighting the cowboys who are stealing cattle now for the British Army in New York City up in the wilds of Westchester County. Right now, today as we speak, my dragoons are fighting those cowboys.
Well, I have heard from my friend Captain Hamilton that they have not only taken the steer for meat, but they've also taken the milk cows.
Absolutely.
And that as a result, there is no milk for chowder. And that the chowder is simply awful without the milk.
Well, that's how Manhattan clam chowder started, because they ran out of milk.
They've been adding the tomatoes,
They've been
I've
adding
heard.
tomatoes, yes.
And on top of it, a lot of these recipes will have new milk.
And what is new milk?
New milk is fresh from the cow. So without the cow, you have no new milk.
Is it true the British are taking all sorts of animals and everything, claiming it to be the property of the king and their own, and taking everything from here
Absolutely
and
true.
across in Connecticut as well?
Absolutely. So dishes like this that could be extended with, wheat and flour, they would take the smallest amount of whatever they had and extend it.
And since you are so close to the Sound, would you be adding seafood and fish and things like that?
It probably was a side dish. It wouldn't have been. I've never seen a recipe with it in the pudding itself, but definitely it would have been used.
Well, I would love to come back sometime for an actual meal with you. I know that my fans of Mrs. Q Live would love to have Mrs. Q come and have a meal with you.
You're going to be at the tavern at the Catch'em Inn.
Yes.
But right now, I'd like to take this off and cut it open.
Well, let's watch. Mr. Q, do we have any questions about the food?
Actually, I'd like to eat some right
Well, I'm going to have to serve you a salad.
Mr. Q says he would like to try the food. I hope you're all enjoying this. If you have any questions about the food or any questions to any of the other interpreters you're seeing today, please be sure to enter them in the chat and we will pass those on. We are having a great time and we hope you are as well. Young sir, are you going to try it? Let's see, go ahead.
We came here from Black Rock, the other side of the town. We drove here. Where Caleb Brewster went.
Yes, yes.
So we all came here together.
I finally visited his gravesite 2 years ago. Finally went up there, yes.
Oh, in Fairfield?
Yeah.
Oh, we're right there. We're Black Rock. All of us drove here.
Right.
We're studying it on the other side, the Caleb Brewster
you
side.
are. Yeah, I've been to
Yeah,
the
we're
historical site up
going
there.
to the Brewster house a little bit later.
Yay.
Feel free to go in and take pictures because that's my camera is over there, so you can get right in front of me. Oh my goodness. It is a pudding. We are friends, but
Well,
we
we're
will if you
friends,
would like
but-
us to. Oh wow. Thank you. Hello, sweetie. Oh no, God. I'm gonna take her.
Okay, you ready?
Looks like we're gonna cut a piece.
Thank you. Well, let's come over and
Hold on. Just one on that side.
see. Mr. Q is positioning the camera so you'll have the best view possible as we cut open the pudding. I'm looking forward to visiting you and Setauket much more, Major Talmadge.
Okay, welcome. You're welcome. Always welcome. Now that's a Mary Talmadge's recipe. That was a recipe from my wife's cookbook.
Now, your wife was a Floyd?
My wife was Mary Floyd, the oldest daughter of William Floyd, one of the 2 Long Island signers of the Declaration of Independence.
You may know that I have on social media shared a lovely portrait of her in a blue silk dress with her children around her.
Yes.
A lovely portrait.
The
of your
original is
wife.
up in Litchfield, Connecticut. I've seen the original.
It was a very nice dress you bought her.
Go ahead.
Oh my, yes.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to.
It's all right. Put this on here. Shall we see how it is? Oh my. Very good, ma'am. Mr. Q, I think you would like this.
Would you like to try?
Just a bit of sweetness from some raisins, are they?
Oh, gee, I wanted that.
It's very good. Everyone should try.
Is this a pudding as in captain and commander pudding? Is this a pudding as in captain and commander pudding?
That they would make on a ship. I think it is, isn't it?
The English, it's just a ton of lard.
They would. Lard, actually, this recipe or her recipe, Mary's recipe called for suet. Suet. No, lard comes from a pig, suet comes from a cow. 2 different properties when, yes, I do. Trust me, I know it. So the 2 would be, now, we don't really make suet here, so I can't go to the butcher and buy it. It would have to be a special order. I can make it, but a modern comparison to it would be Crisco. You could take Crisco, put it in the freezer, right? But you could, but it would be an equal to using suet in a historic recipe.
I was a big Patrick O'Brien who wrote Captain and Commander.
And a wonderful film, too.
Yes.
Good film, but he's like 19 books that he did.
Yes.
And they talk about a pudding.
And ship cooking. So I might guess that on Lord Howe's ships, the cooks
Probably.
would likely be cooking things like this on Lord Howe's ships and
Possibility.
on
For the officers only.
and on Captain Jones, our own Captain Jones.
I'm part of it.
You are part of our live stream today. Mr. Q, can we say hello to this lovely dog? This is Brandon.
Hi, Brandon.
Audiences always love dogs. Hi, baby. Oh my goodness.
Well, I enjoyed speaking with you.
I
Thank you.
enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
So what I'm going to do is just give me
Do you think Mr. Q very good, wasn't
Very
it?
good.
Well, let's see where Mr. Talmadge is taking us next. Major Talmadge, are you still eating?
Yeah. Do you need a...
No, I'm good. That was very good, wasn't it?
Ed, do you need a wipe?
Where do they get the curry?
So the curry would have been the West Indian.
Yeah.
I look forward to trying more of your food in the future.
That's good. I can't wait.
Thank you.
So the tavern, it's a full working tavern, and it's from 1693, the hearth kitchen that I cook on. And excuse me, no. I'll serve it to you.
Would you like to tell everyone the name of the tavern and where it's located if they would like to come sometime?
One moment. It's the Catch'em Inn, located in Santa Mauritius, and it dates back to 1693.
Wonderful, and I will see you there soon.
And
Thank
I
you
was
so
privileged-
much. Thank you, me
so much
too.
for popping in.
Thank you.
I was privileged enough that Miss Schwint cooked me a meal from the original 1693 fireplace as soon as it was restored. I had the first meal out of that fireplace a few years ago. So you...
Comments here
Okay. What are we getting?
from Janet Davidson.
Yes. Mrs. Davidian.
The video, yeah, I love the live stream, and Mrs. Q, I'm glad I don't have to eat the food.
The food is good, Mrs. Davidian. I know it does not look good, but it tastes very good. Oh, Mrs. McCabe, thank you for watching. Oh, the pudding is very good. Mrs. McCabe is Irish and understands pudding, I think. Are we going to talk to this red coat?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, was there manufacturing like for the barrels?
Or
You know,
is there someone else available? I'm leaving it up to Major Talmadge to guide us through. All right.
All good friends of mine.
Let's see who's not busy. Thank you guys, all of you, for watching. This is a great day out here. The weather is wonderful. We're out here in the country. Those, by the way, that we're passing, and we'll stop to take a better look of them when the curator returns, are copies of the original spy letters written by members of the Culper spy ring. And I noticed right here is a Woodhull signature. It's James J. Why, it's John Jay's brother, James J., the inventor of invisible ink.
Well,
Or perhaps the inventor.
perhaps. He either invented it or discovered it while he was in France.
James J. So this is the brother of Mr. John Jay, who you might know later would serve as first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and a governor of New York. During the war, he was an ambassador to Europe. He spent time in France, Spain, and Holland with his lovely wife, Sarah Livingston Jay. And those of you who follow me know that I have spoken about Mr. and Mrs. Jay quite often. So this is a letter written by Mr. Jay, younger brother, I believe, of John Jay. Younger brother. And I'm not sure who this is, but
Here's a letter
it is
that I
looks
wrote.
like it's addressed to General Washington. Is this one of yours?
Yes, it's one of my letters that I wrote to General Washington in 1779.
Oh my goodness. And this one? Oh, is this a part of this letter? Yes, this is there, the middle two pages. I don't know if people understand that when you wrote it was on a piece of paper folded in half. So this would be the front page and the back page as it's folded here on the crease, the two inner pages, and the address on the outside fold. And the map. So we are, I assume, out here, and my home, as you know, is way down here in New York City. And all of this region will be occupied by the British during the war.
We're about 60 miles from New York City right now.
Quite a long ride in the carriage. It took us 2 days, sir.
Yes, it
To
did.
get here, we had to stop halfway and spend the night.
Yes.
A long journey. Hello, you two look lovely. Thank you for coming out today for Culper Spy Day. My name is Mrs. Q, and I am a merchant from New York City, and I am out here today visiting my good friend, Major Benjamin Talmadge, who some of you might know was the gentleman who ran the Culper spy ring. Do you have any questions for Major Talmadge? You two look lovely. Who made your dresses? You bought them. They're very well done. You look wonderful.
My name is Maddie. I'm from Long Island.
And you are?
I'm also, my name is Lily, and I'm also from Long Island.
Wow, two lovely young ladies from Long Island today. Yes?
My name is Abigail, and I'm from Long Island.
Are you related or are you
We're
friends?
sisters.
You are sisters. And friend?
And I'm their friend.
That's wonderful. Thank you all for coming out today. And who's your dog?
It's just a toy dog.
He's just a toy dog. He's very cute.
Thank you.
You all look lovely, and I enjoy your unicorn shirt with the sequins. Very nice.
Abby also had a
Mr. Q, of course, wants to embarrass the mothers as well.
It's okay. This is our oldest, Aaron, and he's brought it to Abigail and Lillian.
Oh, nice to meet all of you today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming out.
Abby had the same dress as me, but blue.
Oh, you did? Oh, is it from the same pattern?
Yeah.
Yes.
It got hot.
It did. I had on a scarf, and I took mine off because I got too hot with my scarf. And I am, of course, you are young ladies, so you are more liberal in the way you can dress underneath, but as an older lady, I have on many layers of clothes here. So this is my little underdress called a chemise. And over that, I have my skirt and my apron and my gown and my stays. So you got young, you don't need to wear stays yet. But I have on my stays that give me this nice figure that I don't really have anymore. But in the 18th century, when you wear stays, you always look wonderful, no matter what you look like without them.
The dress is beautiful.
Thank you very much. This is a typical city summer outfit made of cottons and linens, and I have a matching scarf, but it was too hot, and a matching apron and bonnet.
We'll get one for next year.
Yeah. No. I have a lot of heavy winter clothes, but this is my summer outfit, and I am not wearing accurate 18th century shoes because there is no way I could walk all day in them.
Neither am I.
Oh, these are close though. These are very close. Those can pass. And so can yours. Oh yes, look at the quilting and the bows. Those are excellent. Mine are. With some buckles on them to pretend they're accurate.
Thank you.
Where is Mr. Talmadge? Mr. Talmadge is calling. Thank you all so much for spending some time with me today.
Before you leave.
Oh. Mr. Q will give you my card.
Oh, thank you.
If you come into the city, I do conduct tours of Lower Manhattan, so you're.
So I've already looked at your site.
Oh, well.
Theodosia.
Yes, I wrote the book about Theodosia.
Every day. So we're a little obsessed with Hamilton.
Well, please come out. I'll be happy to take you around.
I did. I looked you up. We had benefited our school, and we were looking to offer a tour of all of Hamilton.
Well,
so this is fantastic.
With me. I do student tours all the time.
This is amazing. Oh, and Theodosia. I'd like to know about Theodosia.
Okay.
Actually, she's only mentioned.
Yeah,
in the
fascinating
movie.
life and very inspirational.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, no, I had done the ones before that.
Who is this Major Talmadge?
Well, this is a display from Raynham Hall, which is Robert Townsend's
home
in Oyster Bay. He was also found out to be Culper Jr. in the 1930s.
Many years later, right?
150 years later,
And
absolutely.
what you're seeing that we're displaying here actually are the codes that were used not just by the patriotic side, but by the loyalists and by the British side. So we have Major Talmadge's code, which is a code book that is similar to a dictionary, only it's a dictionary of words and numbers. So when the spy letters were written, they were not only written in invisible ink, but they were also written in code. But we weren't the only ones. The British also had their own
Indeed,
codes.
they did.
They had everything from ciphers. Major Andre, the head of British intelligence, actually had a very complex code that were 3 numbers. 1 number representing the page you would go to, 1 number representing the sentence, and the last number representing the word.
And how did you decide which book he was using?
You know what? Major Andre had his own techniques. That was his side, okay? Our side had our techniques.
Something different.
And there were many people involved in this, so I'm sure they changed it up as appropriately necessary, basically.
Coincidentally, code 729 was Major Talmadge's code for Setauket.
And I know 726 was Mr. Rivington.
Yes.
I think that's the only one I know.
Well, 711, you can't forget that one, was
No,
Washington.
that was General Washington.
And 723 was Robert Townsend, who
Right.
was Culper Jr.
Right.
And of course, we have Abraham Woodhull here from Setauket, who was Culper Sr. So there were many people involved in this group, and all of their personalities and their traits and their lifestyles lended to when ended up being useful to Washington.
Now, do you know if my Taylor neighbor, Hercules Mulligan, was an official member of the spy ring or just an auxiliary actor?
I'm going to send you over to someone who's an expert on that, and that is right behind me. Go over to Claire Belageau. She's the educational director for Raynham Hall Museum. She's going to give you a little bit more specifics than I can.
Thank
So I
you.
would go over there
And
for
I
that.
must ask you where you got the beautiful fabric for your gown.
Actually, I did a little bit of research for this because this is called Tree of Life, and it is a pattern that existed during the 1700s. Of course, it's made with modern materials, so I can wear it during this time.
Right.
But Tree of Life, and a little bit of research on the internet, basically.
Yes, oh,
So.
it is a lovely pattern,
Thank you.
very
I appreciate
becoming.
it. Love yours also.
Thank you.
Especially the apron.
I did so much research on aprons. I have so many pictures of aprons and all the different apron fabrics and the way they tied the aprons and wore the aprons, and one would not think that an accessory like an apron could be so complicated.
That's right. That's right. The whole period is very interesting, and especially for children. Children who get into this period of history are able to discover that they can still discover things. That history isn't just something old that happened, but something where, like looking for fossils, they can figure out how something happened faster now than we ever could.
And something fun.
Yeah, exactly. So
thank you for spending the time with us
You're
today.
welcome. Have a great day. Enjoy. Please head over that way.
We will.
Well,
Thank
we
you.
will, yeah. With the ladies of the DAR.
You need to change.
I did a wonderful job. Believe me, you look great.
You know, I tell you confidentially, he makes everyone look great except me.
Oh, don't say
It's so funny about being on Facebook, but then you started to talk. I didn't want to interrupt you.
But that's okay. He makes everyone look great except me.
So the Bayman couldn't go and they couldn't get it. How are you?
Hello, ladies. I'm Mrs. Q. I'm visiting from New York City.
Oh, how nice.
And I'm out here today to learn all about our friends in Setauket and the various ways you have devised to foil the plans of the enemy.
Oh, well, I think you should speak to Rita over there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. You all look lovely today. Thank you.
Rita, I think they need to speak to you.
Hello, Mr. Talmadge.
This is Rita Newman. She's the regent of the Anna Smith Strong chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution.
I am Mrs. Q, or Karen Quinones, and I play an 18th century New York City merchant, so I'm here today as my 18th century character, Mrs. Q. And I, of course, have left my home, which, like you, is under occupation, and have come out today to learn all about the lovely schemes you have devised to foil the plans of the enemy.
Oh, we have schemes, don't we, ladies?
I'm sure the ladies have the best schemes of all.
Our husbands are off fighting in militia.
Absolutely.
We hold up the fort here at home. We have messages coming in and out, but we have to be extremely secretive about them.
I'm sure, as you have the horrible redcoats sneaking around everywhere, living in your
Oh,
homes
yes.
and
Oh, yes.
listening to everything, right?
Yes, but fortunately we have Anna Smith Strong.
I met Anna. I spoke to Anna. Oh,
wonderful. Yes. And do you know what she did? Did she tell you about it?
She did.
Yes.
She a brave and
yes. The where she grew up is right near one of our meeting places.
So you
here
are
in
the
Long
Anna
Island.
Smith Strong chapter of the DAR?
Yes, we proudly are.
Excellent. I didn't know there was an Anna Smith Strong chapter. I've spoken at some of the New York City chapters, but I didn't know. Mr. Q, do you have my card?
Yes, I do.
I'll give you my card if you would. I would love to come out to meet all of you sometime.
You ladies are all on Facebook Live right now as we speak.
Yeah, so
That's okay.
I do a show on Facebook called Live with Mrs. Q, live from the 18th century.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? I
And
think I'm following you.
are you? Thank you. I'm meeting many people out here today who are. I do tours of Lower Manhattan in normal clothes or sometimes costumed, yes. Thank you. Okay. I'm sure I can get more information from Major Talmadge. Thank you, ladies. Look, these wonderful quilts for sale. Very nice. Look at this. They are very nice.
Oh, you sold Beth Ann's, I see.
Very, very impressive work. I'm absolutely not up to that type of needlework myself.
Oh.
It's not something I'm capable of. So quite impressive. Thank you, ladies, for spending the time with me. Thank you. Oh, in the no, unfortunately, and for some time they did a Washington's inaugural ball as well, and that hasn't happened for the last few years
We're still
either.
under a little tyranny in the city, so.
The occupiers haven't quite left completely yet. You understand?
They'll have their own organization.
As we have our own problems with occupation.
Indeed.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, ladies.
We'll see you ladies next week, I guess.
All right, Major Talmadge. So maybe we can go over and see this red coat over here. Hello. Hello, I'm just visiting Setauket for the first time from New York.
I think it's high time.
I think we took the modern version of Austin Rose Trail called the Long Island Expressway.
So you didn't have to stop and water the horses or anything?
No, Mr. Q has a magical machine known as the flying machine that travels very quickly.
Horseless?
It's horseless.
What do you use, oxen?
It's
Took a
his
lot of
secret.
work to get that machine together.
Are you going to take her down to the church?
Yes, I'm going to take her to all the... This is Nancy, a longtime member of our DAR.
Nice to meet you, ma'am. You look wonderful. What wonderful fabric, as is yours, too. Very becoming ladies. So nice to see all the ladies dressed so well. Oh, my God. Because I'm from the city, so I decided. Plus I'm also wearing all things that in normal times would be available in my shop. So I do have a shop for ladies. So in normal times, all of these fabrics and things would be available in my shop. But for now, my shop is occupied by wretched redcoat soldiers, and I hear a quartermaster. And my shop is now a supply station for the English.
So where is it?
Hanover Square.
Hanover Square.
Hanover Square, not far from Mr. Townsend. Just a few steps from Mr. Townsend. Yes, yes. So we don't know right now what has become of our home, so we're just hoping when the time comes that we return it will be livable.
Interesting.
So they have, I'm sure, destroyed many of your homes as well.
Oh, the British.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, this is British, so that.
So you have them all living with you in your homes?
In our homes, and as you'll point out, when you take her down to show her where the Woodhull marker with the farm, and I had one person that I was working with, and he said, well, but he was a very sickly young man, and I said, no, he wasn't. I said, is he good? Well, why did he have to use couriers? And I said, because if you think about it, that whole hill going up to the Setauket Presbyterian Church there were no trees because they had to have farms, so they took down the trees. So you've got Woodhull's farm here, and the headquarters for the British right up there.
Where they can watch.
So things are a little tight, but it's very easy. You get down there, and it's very easy to be able to figure out exactly how the logistics worked out.
Oh, it sounds so exciting. We can't wait to see it.
And the cemetery, you really ought to take her to Anna Smith Strong Cemetery, because that's
I'll take her up there.
That's beautiful.
If not, we'll do another trip.
Thank you.
We'll do another. Thank you so much. I do as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
You too.
She would need a week here to go over everything.
I think so.
I will be back. I will be back. I've been invited to enjoy some food and some other things, so we'll be back. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks, Nancy. I'll see you next weekend.
right. Major Talmadge. Well, unfortunately, I think we must. What is the audience? Is the audience?
Oh, a lot of comments.
Do they want to speak to the red coat? The audience? Major. Major.
Oh, yes.
Sure. Well, just so for your viewers to see, this is a model British Brown Bess. Most of the Americans early on in the war were using French Charleville mustards, 69 caliber. This musket's 75 caliber, which means it fires a musket ball 3/4 of an inch thick. So if it does hit you, and it doesn't even hit one of your bones, if it just penetrates an organ and goes through you, it'll go into your body this big and come out this big because it's made of lead and it expands going through bodily tissue. But the way it operates basically is you have your...
I know the
your
gentlemen love this.
You have your lock at half cocked. That's another expression that came from the 18th century. Did you ever hear the expression, don't go off half cocked?
Indeed.
That's what it means. If your musket was fired at half cocked position, it would go back for repair because half cock is a safety position. It should only go off when it's in the full cock in the lock. Okay? Now, this is your frizzen. What you would do, the only requirement for joining the Continental Army in the 18th century was to have two matching teeth, one upper and one lower. You would bite a paper cartridge, pour some of the powder in the pan, shut the frizzen, okay? Pour the balance of the powder in here with the wadding, which was the paper cartridge, okay? And the musket ball, 75 caliber. Then you would ram it down. Now you can hear that ping, that means it's empty. That's how we know we have an empty breech. Then you would remove rammer, return rammer, go to this position, and then your sergeant would say shoulder fire locks. Left shoulder. Okay? Then make ready. You go to the make ready position, about here. And what you would do is present, and at that point you'd go to full cock. Okay? And then you would aim and you see the spark? Okay, that spark ignites the powder that you put into the pan. The flame from that powder which you ignited, when it hits the hardened steel frizzen, that flame shoots into a little hole here called a touch hole. That ignites the main charge in the breech. And all that sets off the main charge, which is actually gas which propels your musket ball. And you have to do that in at least 12 to 14 steps. So if you could fire 4 rounds a minute, which is in other words every 15 seconds, you were like a top British grenadier could probably do that, well trained. American Army probably couldn't. It was more like 3 rounds a minute. On a humid day like today, your black powder, which we call it now, would get all caked up, and you'd be harder to ram down the cartridge. So you'd probably go down to 2 rounds a minute. By that time, the British were advanced.
I would say at that time, you might be in trouble.
Right. So it takes all that to fire them. Average was about 3 rounds a minute.
That's amazing.
Not like the weapons of today. But this
So
is.
you would actually shoot and run.
And what is this? What is all of the engraving on here?
Oh, okay. This is a model 1762, which is not, it doesn't have to be made in 1762, but they first came out with it in 62.
And is this the maker's name?
Yes, yes. Some of them said Tower Arms. Most of the British ones that came to this continent said Tower on them. And
is that a crown?
that's a Crown GR, Georgius Rex, which at that time was King George III.
Put on everything.
Yeah, well, George III, King George was king for from 1760 to 1820.
Have they marked that on your buildings here as they do in New York City?
No, they have not. They have not. But another term that came from the 18th century was, you've heard the term lock, stock, and barrel?
Yes.
Lock, stock, which is the furniture, the wooden part, and the barrel. That's where it comes from, the whole ball of wax. That's basically how it's fired.
And are you going to fire it for us?
Well, I don't know if the gentleman has any powder. I don't on me.
You to interview the red coat?
Okay. Thank you for coming.
you so much.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, I was. No,
That's
I was
all
planning on
right.
coming here.
That's all right. Thank you.
It's about 10.5 pounds, but it feels more than that when you're marching. When you're marching for 40 miles, it gets a lot heavier.
Well, Mr. Is it as tall as me? It is as tall as me. And what happens when you add a bayonet?
When you add, may I have your bayonet, sir? Now notice this is a.
Oh my goodness!
This bayonet has 3 sides to it. Okay.
It's Mrs. Q with a bayonet.
Mrs. Q with a bayonet.
Oh my gosh! Let me see if I can carry it. Hold on. All right.
Go on your left shoulder.
All right.
Well.
How do I hold this with my right hand?
Well.
Whoa! Oh my goodness. Well, I have newfound respect for the ladies of the time who knew how to handle their family firearms, as this is greatly heavy. This will take quite a strong forward arm to balance, isn't it? Oh my gosh.
Now the triangular bayonet, as you see here, was actually outlawed by the 19th century in the First Geneva Convention because a triangular wound doesn't readily heal on the field. A surgeon in the 18th century, a field surgeon, couldn't possibly stop the bleeding on the field if someone was wounded with a triangular bayonet. So ultimately, the victim would bleed to death. So this was outlawed at the First Geneva Convention, as I said, and then they went to the flat bayonet, which they still use today.
Major, shall we return the red coat his weapon and speak to him?
Yes.
We have many people watching who are interested in. Let's walk over. So I hope you were all entertained by me with the musket and bayonet.
We have new trading partner. You now no longer have to spend money protecting that area.
Yeah.
And not only that, but with all of the wars that you've been having with France and Britain, Dutch, Spanish, and everything.
Do you have a little back and forth with him that you do?
No, actually I saw him 2 years ago. He's part of the 23rd Regiment, so I know those guys.
Okay.
I decided to fight them in the
Okay.
Caribbean. They took more places than the French. They were fighting in India.
I think you should.
Yeah. So yeah.
So hold on, we're just waiting for this gentleman to be free so that we can talk to him. And thank you guys all for watching today. We're having a really great time. I encourage you to come out next year to Culper Spy Days. I'll come out again. This has been so much fun, and we've only started. We're only at one site. I should tell you that this live stream will be interrupted shortly when we get into the carriage and travel to our next site, but we will resume the live stream once we get out of the carriage. So we have a couple more things to see before we board the carriage and move on to our next location.
Yeah. See, I have my 15 seconds of fame coming.
Okay.
Oh, that's all right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sir, I am Mrs. Q. I am a merchant from New York City. I have had to flee because of your king's occupation of my city, and I'm living in the Hudson Valley, and I hear that your brothers in arms are living in my home.
Well, unfortunately, I believe that's a part of the quartering act. Well, it is slowly approaching winter time, so if the colonies have been unable to supply us with a barracks, we're forced than no other than to take anywhere that just so happens to be available to us.
Mr. Talmadge, I believe they could go home.
They could. We would like them to.
But, well, we need to restore order. I believe Mr. Talmadge over here, I might want to have a word with him.
Well, this gentleman, can I say it?
You may, sir.
He's a double agent. He works for us.
That's because we can't bear to have a red coat in our live stream. That's certainly
well, we have
not
a friendly
true.
One here. 23rd Regiment.
Yes, 23rd. I'm a member of the 23rd Royal Welsh Fusiliers. In particular, I am part of the Grenadier Company of this group. You can always tell with the British Army and many armies as a whole for exactly signs that indicate that we're certain parts of companies or certain regiments. And in particular, this right here is a perfect sign of showing why I'm a Grenadier. Because back then,
And your button's 23rd?
Oh yes, yeah. Trust me. As long as you know the number 23, you can tell I'm a member of the 23rd because it's everywhere on me.
Is it?
Yes.
And
But
tell me about your weapons, please, and the supplies that you're carrying.
definitely. Well, let me give you some quick history of this first as we were talking about this. This would essentially have served as almost like a match case. This would be a slow burning cord here, and we would have it lit to light grenades. And we would have a big...
While it's on your person?
Yep, slowly burning. Health and safety didn't really exist, but they had a big pouch of grenades, and they actually almost resembled Looney Tunes grenades. It would be a cast iron ball where you'd have a little fuse sticking out, and they would place it up here, it'd catch, and then they'd throw it. Now, by the time of the American Revolution, though, they essentially had all phased that out, primarily due to the fact that, even back then, we talked about no health and safety, but they realized they weren't that effective. Similar to Looney Tunes, many times you'd have it where they'd burn it and it would blow up in their face. Other times you'd throw it and it would just land there and peter out and do nothing. And they realized another thing. Well, these guys have to get close to throw a grenade. They've already been shot a whole bunch of times in order to get close enough to throw that grenade. And now by the time they're ready to throw that grenade, the people they were going to throw grenades at have already marched away. So they realized that doesn't really serve a purpose. This largely became more ornamental to indicate that we were grenadiers. But with that being said, when you had the time of the grenades, they usually expected the tallest men and the strongest men to be a grenadier.
And how tall are you, sir?
I am 6'1".
You are very tall for a gentleman of my time.
Exactly. So you would have the tallest people join the grenadiers, and that stuck. Even by the time of the Revolution, even though they got rid of the grenades, they kept the tallest, strongest guys, and they turned us into essentially shock troops. If you needed that hole to be opened up even further, send in the grenadiers. We'll take care of that mess.
And they were the ones that were so properly trained that they could usually fire 4 rounds a minute, one every 15 seconds, which is incredible, especially when that gunpowder at the time, we call it black powder today. In the 18th century, we never called it black powder, okay, because there was no other powder. There was no smokeless powder. That didn't come into being for another 100 years till the 1890s, more than 100 years later.
So I expect that with your skill, our young, inexperienced American soldiers must be quite terrified, and that you perhaps exploit your psychological advantage over them.
Believe me, we were.
Exactly. And that was the thing. Many, many times, all throughout the American Revolution, a lot of the big part of it was, again, picture yourself. Even here in Setauket, you're a farmer. You're just simply you just so happen to get a copy of Thomas Paine's Common Sense. You read it and you get all inspired. Yeah, this is a great idea. Let's get independence. Let's do this. I think this is a fantastic idea to form our own government. Why not? So you get ready. You and your buddies. You manage to get a hold of some muskets. You're all set. And then all of a sudden, the British Army shows up. Here you are in Brooklyn, on the plains, getting ready to fight them in the Battle of Long Island, and you start loading up. You're getting frightened because you've never been in battle before.
Oh, as Joseph Plum Martin said, how terrifying you were when he finally saw you coming at him.
Exactly. So all of a sudden you're shaking, you're dumping powder, and all of a sudden these troops who are almost automatons, just fully getting themselves all set, doing all of these different motions.
That's what he said, marching over the dead, marching through screaming injured people as though it was nothing. He said he was so frightened he couldn't move when he saw you.
Exactly. And for us to be extremely well trained, and you just have us just completely making anyone who sees that will just decide, you know what, this revolution isn't worth it. And they would throw their guns down or they'd just run away. And that's why a lot of the times the American war effort, you had someone such as George Washington rallying everyone together and saying, come on.
Absolutely.
And so, to have someone such as me, it's just absolutely terrifying.
I would say that as a lady, to have someone such as you on my side would be a very comforting thing.
Yeah.
But to have someone such as you wandering around my town not on my side might be a very intimidating thing.
And the purpose of the hat, it had no purpose at all. Didn't provide shade. It was a ridiculous hat. The only purpose it provided was to make a man look taller.
Exactly.
So how many more inches are you with your hat? Perhaps you're 6'4"?
Just by removing my hat, you can see, yeah. The thing is...
And I think I am 5'2", which makes me even a couple inches taller than a lady at that time. So a gentleman of your size would be quite large and intimidating standing in front of my home or my business.
Now, I regret not bringing it, but keep in mind, the Grenadiers, Their uniforms evolved. The British Army's uniforms evolved throughout the years. So right now, as you can see, this is around 1777. So we've already at this point in time, they've analyzed, they said, oh, these grenadier caps, they're impractical, so they stored them away. But in 1775, when we showed up off the boat in Boston, we had grenadier caps, which goes back to the time of grenades.
Are you the gentleman who marched to Lexington?
No. Most, if you're talking about a Royal Welsh Fusilier in 1777, most of us were almost entirely wiped out in Lexington, Concord, and especially Bunker Hill.
Oh my
so
goodness!
I'm the
Well, maybe we
replacement.
should celebrate that, Mr. Talmadge.
Yeah, I would have been one of the replacements.
So
most likely.
about your weaponry, sir, let me tell you. Looks like you're carrying some
Quite a
interesting
lot.
things.
Yes. Well, the main thing here, of course, is this. This is officially known as the land pattern musket. This land pattern musket had been around since the 1730s. This is the second model, but it's more colloquially known. Everyone calls it the Brown Bess musket. Exactly. This would have been, of course, this was the every weapon of the British Army. This was the one that everyone knows about because almost everyone.
Have you noticed how small it looks in his hands,
Yeah.
and how enormous it looked when I held it next to me?
Oh yeah.
It
Yes.
looks so small in your hands,
Oh,
sir,
yes.
and so light.
Yeah. Well, carrying it around for a few years, you get used to the
You have a bayonet.
But yes, exactly. The probably even more important than the musket itself is the bayonet, which, you know, if you needed to end a battle, this would be what would do it.
And you do that as I assume, as close as you and Mr. Q are today.
Oh yes, exactly. The bayonet could easily reach out there. And yeah, that would have been the main weapon. I mean, not only does it serve good against charging the enemy, but if they ever charge us with horses, we've got something much, much better than a simple sword or anything.
A bayonet. And
Yeah.
I see you are carrying a sword.
Yes. Now this, at the time of the Revolution, similar to this, had become more ceremonial. In fact, very early into the war, we realized this is impractical.
Not sword fighting very
exactly.
much anymore.
You're not going to sword fight. The laws of the 18th century battlefield, you're not going to have that.
Would the sword be an indication of rank or level in society or something like that?
For my group, not necessarily. With the Royal Welsh Fusiliers, this was just a part of the uniform for even a private. But yes, many times you would see other regiments and other groups. If you would see a man carrying a hanger, like this is known, or any kind of sword of some sort, usually they would have a higher rank at some point. You wouldn't expect to see a normal private carrying. But with my regiment, we're a little special.
Well, thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Of course.
We very much appreciate it. It's not often we get to talk to an English soldier, as we tend to be a little biased in our coverage of the American Revolution. So thank you so much for your time.
I'm happy to help you, and we'll soon see the error in your ways.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good day.
I hope all of you enjoyed that. That was wonderful. And we have Major Talmadge here. Is here with a group of children, telling them. Let's see, who can we wander over and see while Major Talmadge is talking? Shall we wander over here, Mr. Q? Mr. Talmadge can find us. Let's see. Do we have any questions or comments that anyone would like to know anything about? Speak with the red coat. Ah! Mrs. Rupert is a member of the DAR. Thank you. The Redcoats were professional soldiers. Indeed, they were, and he was very professional. What time does the event end? It's from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And this isn't the only location. We're going to be moving out to another location soon. We're going to visit, just so that you know, the site of Abraham Woodhull's home. We're going to be visiting the cemetery where he is buried. And we are also going to visit someone known as, I think, Big Bill the Tory. So get ready for that. Is this who Mr. Talmadge told me to speak to?
Hello.
Hello, I am Mrs. Q.
I'm Claire Bellergeau.
Hello, Claire. I'm visiting from New York City. And
Where I live as well.
I'm coming out today to find out how our friends in Setauket are foiling the plans of the enemy. And Mr. Talmadge told me I should come to speak to you a little bit more about the Culper spy ring and the members, and Mr. Townsend, and I had a specific question about Mr. Mulligan and whether Mr. Mulligan was an official member of the spy ring. Was he sort of an adjunct member? I know that he and Mr. Townsend were friendly. Do you know of his relationship with them?
I would say that Hercules Mulligan was a spy, but he was not part of the Culper spy ring. But I know that Robert did know him.
Yes.
I found documents that Robert bought a suit of clothes from him, and that Hercules Mulligan came to Robert's store and bought goods from him. So they definitely knew each other. Also, after the war, both Robert Townsend and Hercules Mulligan joined a very important group, the New York Manumission Society.
They did, that's true.
They were both early abolitionists and thought slavery was morally wrong.
That's right.
That brings me to meeting Liz.
Let's see, tell us about this.
Okay, so this is a new founding figure for America, a woman of color who was enslaved by the Townsend family in Oyster Bay. People think the Townsends were Quakers, but they weren't.
They weren't? What were they?
Baptists, if anything. But Robert, I don't find to be a religious person at all.
No, I don't find him to be either. No.
No, they were in the Baptist church rolls as members of that faith. So that's just a mistake that's been made and repeated. Robert's father was a patriot leader in the New York Provincial Congress.
Was he a lawyer, an attorney?
No, he was a merchant. He owned 5 large international sailing vessels that he had built.
And thus the success that Mr. Townsend had in New York City?
Yeah, the store that Robert had was an offshoot of his father's business.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So Robert did not own a tavern. He was not a newspaper reporter.
No, that was Mr. Rivington.
And he did not have a partnership with Rivington. In fact, in one of Robert's Culper spy letters as Culper Jr., he writes that Rivington has put an article in his paper saying that there are American spies in New York.
Yes.
And so he certainly was no partner with him.
Did he just work in the coffee house? What was his motivation?
He didn't work in the coffee house at all. The coffee house was on one side of Hanover Square,
Yes, I know.
and Robert's shop was facing him
Right,
opposite.
Right. And for the character I play, my shop is on the other side of Rivington's, opposite Mr. Townsend's.
Another person who had a shop on Hanover Square was a man who made saddles named Richard Sharwin.
Yes.
And his wife, Anne, became a widow at the end of the war when Richard suddenly died. And when you read my book about Liz, you'll hear more about how Anne Sharwin came to own Liz and her young son, Harry.
Is that the woman that Robert married?
No, Robert never married.
He didn't marry.
No. So let's start from the beginning.
Yes.
Liz was enslaved at the Townsend home, and when Colonel John Graves Simcoe encamped in Oyster Bay and made the Townsend house his home, Liz knew him there. He stayed over for the whole winter from the fall of '78 until the spring of '79. In March of that year, he had his good friend Major John Andre come to stay at that house for several weeks. So Liz knew Andre and Simcoe very well. Now, Simcoe was an early abolitionist. He thought slavery was wrong. He originally wanted to command a regiment of escaped American slaves in battle, but he wasn't allowed to do that. He instead was given the Queen's Rangers to command.
You might want to say that the Simcoe represented on the TV show Turn is not in any way like the real John Simcoe.
Yeah, it's completely inaccurate. In fact, there's a holiday in Canada, Simcoe Day, every August, where they celebrate him for founding Toronto and for ending slavery in Canada.
He was indeed a fine man whose name was quite slandered by the TV show.
The Townsend said of all the commanders that billeted in their house, and there were 5, 6, 7 of them, he was the most honorable. In fact, he wrote a 26-line love poem and presented it to their daughter Sally on Valentine's Day of 1779, which is considered America's earliest Valentine.
So he was a fine English gentleman.
He really was. And when he left their house in May of 1779, he helped Liz escape with the Queen's Rangers.
And to where?
Well, they were headed up to Stony Point on the Hudson. Robert followed the regiment, and he wrote to his father, the Queen's Rangers are now beyond Kingsbridge. They had left the tip of Manhattan. Now, Robert continued in this letter to tell his father, you'll never get her back again. Don't even try. Write off her value. She's just a loss to you. But then Liz came into Manhattan, was re-enslaved by a British officer there, and had contact with Robert right around the time when he became the lead spy Culper Jr. And
Do you know
right
how she
after-
made her way back down into New York?
Well, she stayed in Manhattan enslaved by a British officer. How she got from the Hudson down there, it's possible it was with Andre. He was at the Battle of Stony Point.
Right.
And he knew her. He immediately then went into Manhattan. So that's one plausible way that he might have brought her in. This was also the time when Robert joined a volunteer company in New York City on the British side. This was one of his covers to get information. He had a homemade red coat that he would wear and stand guard outside of British headquarters on Bowling Green. And if Liz was enslaved by a top British officer, they would have had a great way to exchange contact.
Indeed.
I can't prove that she's 355, but that letter by Woodhull came right after all these things happened.
This is fascinating. Mr. Q, please get a close-up of the book so that my followers will buy it.
Now, this is an artist's interpretation of Liz. As an enslaved person, she would not have had her portrait done.
Exactly, right.
At the end of the war, she came to Robert and said, "Buy me back. I don't want to go up to Canada with my British master." At that time, she was 3 months pregnant with a baby Robert would later describe as mulatto or mixed
Is that the baby they believe might have been his? No.
That's another story.
Just another story, right?
It's an interesting one, and I'll tell you that one in a second. All right. So Liz then came to live with Robert in his apartment on Peck Slip. She gave birth to a baby, I believe a son named Harry. When that baby was 6 months old, Robert had begun to have anti-slavery beliefs. He actually employed an Irish maid to clean his house, and that's where that other baby comes into play.
Oh, okay. I knew there was a woman in his house.
Yeah, that was Polly Banvard,
Yes.
an Irish maid. Polly would have known Liz because Liz gave birth when Polly was there. Okay, so Robert arranged for a resale of Liz and her baby Harry, who was 6 months old, to a recent widow named Anne Sharwin. She had died when her husband Richard, who made the saddles, died, and they had that store in Hanover Square, right? And so Liz went to live with Anne, and Robert made a deal with her to never move out of New York City without telling him, because Liz wanted to stay there, and he would arrange to buy her back again if that happened. Unfortunately, what actually happened is 1 year later, that woman remarried a man named Alexander Robertson. That's a private school in Manhattan that was founded by that man that still exists. So if any of your followers' kids go to the Alexander Robertson School, you might want to look into that.
Now you know who
they
he
have
was.
a portrait of him. What he did was do something inappropriate with Liz that caused his new marriage to instantly dissolve. It caused a derangement and separation in the marriage. He retained Liz and the baby, kept the baby in Manhattan, and sold Liz south to Charleston without her child. This is in 1785. The man who bought her in Charleston is right here. The man with the club. The man who instigated the Boston Massacre of 1770, a man named Richard Palms. After the war, he was in Charleston, and he's the man who owned Liz. He was a very violent man. He'd been arrested for beating people up. He'd been a Continental Marine. He'd been the bodyguard of John Adams when he went to France to meet with Franklin. So Richard Palms was already well known to history, and now he's got another reason to be known. And Richard Palms owned her in Charleston for 2 years. Robert found out, took Harry, who was then 4, out of that home in New York, brought him to Oyster Bay to his family's house, and started writing to people to get Liz back up to New York from Charleston. And how he accomplished that is also all in my book.
Thank you so much. It sounds like you spent so much time and did
16
so
years.
much. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous.
All primary documents.
That's wonderful.
No legends.
I always tell all of my.
There is somebody quoting here. They got to get that book.
See, good. All of my.
Somebody says you're fabulous.
Great. Thank you, guys.
I really care about Liz, and I really expect her to become a founding figure.
Good.
We need a woman of color to be represented in the story of America's founding.
What a wonderful story. And I always tell everyone who comes on my tours, everybody who follows me on social media, that you must look for people who use original documents. First generation documents.
That's
and
where
that's
you're
why
gonna
we
find
have
the
all
truth.
of those crazy stories about Robert Townsend, because one person reads something that's not true, and then someone takes it from their recollections, and before you know it, everybody has the wrong story. So
let me just
thank
explain
you.
Robert Townsend Jr. real quick.
Please.
Okay, so
I got
Polly
19%.
Oh, battery, we have to recharge.
Polly Banvard was his maid in his New York City apartment, Robert's maid. He also had two roommates, his little brother William and his cousin,
Right.
who all lived there. They called it bachelor's quarters, right, in Peck Slip. Well, after Liz had Harry and had gone off with Anne Sharwin, Polly became pregnant, not by Robert, by William, his little brother.
See, I knew that. Oh, by William.
William
That's the
then
story.
went home
All
to
right.
Oyster Bay and left her high and dry,
Right,
and
right.
Robert let her have his name for her
Yes,
baby.
and she stayed there.
Well, she almost
She stayed
immediately
for a
got
while?
remarried to a man named Buzzkirk. All of those kids had his name, but Robert Jr. retained Robert's name through his whole life. He became a politician of the Equal Rights Party, also
Wow.
called the Loco Foco Party.
Right.
And Robert paid for his education as a carpenter and gave him an inheritance. And paid for his schooling so he could learn French and Latin.
You know,
So
the nice
Robert
thing
helped him.
The nice thing about writing books like this and talking about this is that people get to learn that people were very much the same as we are now. That people fell in love with people, people had affairs with people.
Things got
people-
messy.
Exactly, just like now. That it wasn't as straight and puritanical as we sometimes are taught. So thank you for doing this incredible work and for spending some time with me. And hopefully some of you out there will buy her book.
On Facebook, Espionage and Enslavement. Please like my Facebook page.
Please like it.
And espionageandenslavement.com so you can get a signed copy or learn more.
Please do
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We have to hang out in New York City
We
together.
will.
I live down near Trinity Church.
You do. I do my tours down there. Well, not I used to every day, but often. Let me take one of these. Mr. Q, do you have a Mrs. Q card?
And by the way, you have a great voice.
Oh,
Oh
yes,
my God.
a very good speaker. Thank you.
Thanks. That's
Okay,
great. We'll have to
we
hang
have
out
to-
at Front
Thank
Tavern.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
We have to meet William Jane, Big Bill the Tory.
Yes, well, we need to get in the
So,
car and
yes.
recharge the phone. So let me tell all of you what we're going to do now. We are going to get back in the carriage to our next stop, and while we are traveling, we'll be recharging the phone. So this live stream will end for a few minutes, and when we get to our next destination, the live stream will start again. So watch for part 2 of our live stream from Setauket, Culper Spy Day.
And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, the carriage is horseless.
It is.
So great. So great. Yeah, I'm really going to try to be
We go to
working
the
on
car
a
and we'll.
walking tour.
Are you driving?